As the summer winds down and the new semester ramps up, we've already seen what's happening, and it feels like, to use the expression, we picked up where we left off last spring. And we're about to remark the 1 year anniversary of the 10/7. And based on the conversations I've had with students and with parents and with administrators, with law enforcement, and based on what we've seen at ADL, I'm increasingly concerned. I'm concerned that what we're seeing is an expansion and an escalation of protests, disruption, and blatant anti-Semitism. It is unacceptable, full stop, and it's got to change. So all of us at ADL have been pleased that some universities are taking what appear to be proactive steps to modify their policies, to communicate new expectations, and they are making promises to impose consequences in the face of violative behavior. But I learned to be a skeptic after the last year, when so many of the incidents were clear, indisputable violations of existing codes of conduct or existing practices. So for me, I will feel convinced when I have proof that disciplinary processes are actually being invoked, that real sanctions are being imposed, and that the consequences, punishment, will stick. Or if we see charges being dropped, violative actions being ignored, sanctions being negotiated away, it will confirm that the concern that I feel and so many of you feel is well-founded and real. Now, as we have this webinar today, I'll just kind of start by identifying some of the trends. I would say actually 6 trends that we're following and that we believe campus leaders need to be prepared for. So from the start, many of these protests, and I should just say, at the ADL, we are fierce advocates and defenders of the First Amendment. We believe and we cherish and we treasure and we will defend our right to free expression and our right to free assembly. And yet, at the same time, it is undeniable that many of the quote unquote protests that we saw on campuses were characterized by hostility, were examples of harassment. And unfortunately, since then, we've seen this intensification in tactics, this escalation in rhetoric. We saw vandalism, disruption, blocking access to buildings, establishing encampments, taking over buildings, even arson. All of that has become common. And the violent assaults against Jewish students. I've spoken to many families, and all these students want to do is be free and be safe to go to class, to watch a football game, to participate in extracurricular activities, to attend Shabbat services. That is not too much to ask. In fact, it's the bare minimum. And again, we defend the First Amendment, but your right to freedom of assembly should not compromise my right to assembly. And if students don't feel safe, they can't learn. And that's the #1 obligation of these institutions of higher learning. And the groups behind the protests, we've seen time and again, many of their leaders are embracing terrorists, and they are fetishizing terrorism and espousing not just anti-Israel and anti-Jewish rhetoric, by the way, but anti-American rhetoric, anti-Western rhetoric. I mean, we're seeing the flags. Hezbollah, Hamas, PFLP. I was here in DC for Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech, and I saw myself ISIS flags in Washington, D.C. And there are groups like Samadoun or the Palestinian Youth Movement that post offensive pictures on Instagram, use phrases like, I think it was PYM, that posted last spring, Columbia will burn. And other groups like Students for Justice in Palestine, probably the most prominent one, has a long history of applauding and rationalizing terror. They actually declared October 7th, quote, a historic win for Palestinian resistance. And they called for it, not my words, their words, not just slogans and rallies, but armed confrontation with the oppressors. I mean, it boggles the mind how organizations like this are permitted at schools. And we've seen efforts to avoid accountability and use masks and face coverings to conceal the identity of these people so that they can intimidate and menace other students. And just like white supremacists historically have used masks, again, to hide their identities, they even use it today. Groups like the Blood Tribe, the Proud Boys, the Patriot Front, the Ku Klux Klan, who pioneered this. Um, Protesters today, anti-Israel, pro-Hamas protesters, are wearing full face masks to intimidate students, to threaten passerby. It's not normal. And I want to be clear, I'm not talking about mask wearing to prevent the spread of a virus or because of some religious practice. I'm talking about face coverings that are designed to disguise an individual for the purpose of harassing other people. It just shouldn't be allowed. Another trend we're seeing is faculty and staff engaging in alarming activity in the classroom and beyond. Of course, numerous professors, like a notorious one at Cornell, justified or even celebrated Hamas's attack on 10/7. Some canceled classes to participate, to allow their students to participate in protests or to do it themselves. Other professors offered their students extra credit for participating in these actions. Some even taught their classes from inside the encampments. It's bananas. We're seeing calls for BDS as well as, reemerge. In the prior academic year 22-23, there were 3 BDS votes in America. 3. Last year, there were 80, and 71 of them passed. We're also seeing the emergence of shadow boycotts, whereby Israeli or so-called Zionist academics or experts are removed from research projects, rejected from academic journals, not earning positions, sidelined from grants, and on and on. On many campuses, we're actually seeing chapters organized of a new group called Faculty for Justice in Palestine, and you can imagine what they do. So all of this is particularly concerning, especially when you consider the power dynamics on a campus and the asymmetric authority that a professor has versus the students. I heard a story today about a professor at the University of Chicago who told, this was a person that used they, them pronouns, that told their students that, quote, we will not use terms in this class like even-handed or both sides. We will use terms in this class like opposing settler colonialism, like ethnic cleansing, and so on and so forth. And students were afraid to come out and criticize that because of the, again, power dynamics and what it could do to their grades. I mentioned BDS. We're seeing more demands for universities to divest from endowment funds or any investments to corporations with any ties to Israel. And by the way, more universities are actually platforming people with those noxious views. We've seen it at Brown. We've seen it at Northwestern. We've seen it at other institutions where the individuals espousing this kind of intolerance are not just tolerated, they are welcomed to give presentations to trustees or to the investment committees of endowments. And even more concerning, I would say, they were seeing an increasing tempo of campaigns demanding that the students and the institutions disassociate or divest from essential elements of Jewish life on campus, such as Hillel or Chabad. Again, I want to repeat that. We are seeing activists target and go after Hillels and Chabads because of their association with quote unquote Zionism or Jewish interests. Look, make no mistake, you can have very strong views about Bibi Netanyahu, what's happening in the Middle East, etc. But it is entirely over the line, entirely inappropriate, entirely racist to try to shut down the institutions that support Jewish life. So look, as we approach the 1-year anniversary of 10/7, I think we've all got to be vigilant. I think the time for action is right now. At ADL, I think all of you know our mode is not to be critical, it's to be constructive. Our mode is not to be in opposition, it's to act in cooperation with responsible leaders. with institutions that demonstrate some degree of moral clarity. That's what we want. So we're ready to partner with any college or university administrator, with any professor or professional who needs support to ensure that campus is safe for all students, Jewish and non-Jewish, regardless of their background, irrespective of where they pray or if they believe at all. The only thing we ask for is equal treatment. Jewish students deserve the right to pursue their education free from fear. And it's up to all of us to make sure that that right is upheld, that that privilege is protected as it would be for any other group. So, specifically at ADL, we have 5 simple asks for institutions. Number 1, clearly communicate the standards and rules governing the campus community and enforce them. Number 2, support Jewish students. If a student isn't safe, they can't learn. And again, that is the utmost responsibility of any institution of higher education. Number 3, ensure campus safety. No one should be exempt from the rules and the practices because of their politics. Number 4, reaffirm the professional responsibilities of faculty on campus. Professors may be tenured, they may belong to unions, but they have no right to treat their Jewish or Israeli students different than everyone else. And finally, be prepared for 10/7. Some groups have already announced their intent to hold a quote, week of rage. Week of rage, these anti-Israel groups are talking about starting on 10/7. Like, I'm sorry, unacceptable. They should be able to do those events if they want to. The university should not endorse it, should not support it, should not privilege them with space. Events that are designed to marginalize and malign a group of individuals should not be tolerated. Full stop. So, in closing, fighting anti-Semitism on campus, pushing back on all forms of hate, that's everyone's responsibility if we want to live in a shared society. But today, college and university leaders not only are uniquely positioned, they are particularly responsible to take meaningful, consequential action now. All of us are depending on them to do so. With that said, thank you for listening. And I'd now like to welcome ADL's Vice President of Advocacy, my colleague, Shira Goodman, to the call to lead the next part of the conversation. Shira, over to you.
Thanks, Jonathan, for setting the stage for us. We're grateful today to be joined by Luda Issacharoff, a recent graduate from the University of Oregon and former student body president and an intern with ADL's National Affairs team, and by Lauren Post, an analyst with ADL Center on Extremism. Thank you both for being here with us today. And Luda, could you take a few minutes to tell us a little bit about your experiences on campus last year and what you're hearing from your friends who are still on campuses across the country?
Yes, hello everyone. As Shira said, my name is Luda Issacharoff, and I'm a recent graduate from the University of Oregon, and I'm grateful to be here to be part of this conversation today. This issue is very close to my heart because I just came off a college campus with a challenging situation. And it's close to me because many of my friends, even though I've graduated, remain on college campuses. My own little brother is heading back to campus in a couple of weeks to start his quarter. So I'm really hoping for change, as all of you are. My experience on campus was very different from many of my Jewish peers who are activists on this issue across the country, because as a student body president, and then after being student body president, I worked as a student assistant in the university president's office. I didn't have an adversarial relationship with my administration. I had open lines of communication with my university president, with his vice presidents, with our general counsel, with our chief of police. And even then, with having all these connections, different from my peers across the country who couldn't even get a response from their administrations, I was disheartened to learn that this university that I love so dearly, they didn't really have the capacity, the preparedness, or really the will, the desire to take anti-Semitism seriously on our campus. Just one example to kind of set the tone of everything we experienced is when we had over 100 students storm our student union building, where students were quietly working and laid down on the ground and blocked the walkways. I was getting calls from Jewish students that they were stuck inside the building. And when I brought up to my general counsel the policies that were being violated and highlighted them for him, he told me that obviously blocking the hallways, using amplified sound, and interfering with students' ability to work are not allowed, but the challenge is enforcing the rules. And he told me those who are traumatized by the actions of these protesters should use every opportunity to avoid the area. And so this kind of set the tone that Jewish students are always told to leave, to avoid, to walk around, instead of holding those who they always admit are violating university policies accountable. So I'm really grateful to Jonathan for talking about the importance of enforcement of policies, because without that, there's no guarantee that Jewish students will be kept safe. And the last thing I'll say here in my introduction is that we are hearing such anti-Semitic and hateful rhetoric on our campuses. And unfortunately, this rhetoric is not condemned in the way it should be. But the most important thing is that rhetoric almost always leads to consequences, and Jewish students are the ones to deal with the brunt of those consequences. On our campus, after 3 weeks of an encampment and no condemnation of the very anti-Semitic rhetoric we were hearing, our Chabad Jewish Center, which was the only safe space for many Jewish students, was defaced with the words "Free Gaza." And that was the only time in their decade of being in Eugene, Oregon, they've ever had an anti-Semitic incident. And it happened to happen after 3 weeks of this encampment. So rhetoric leads to action. It has major consequences. And I'm hoping we have a better year this year.
Thanks, Luda. And we're going to talk a little bit later about some of the other work you've done over the last year. And thank you for your leadership and for being so open and honest with us. Lauren, earlier this week, Center on Extremism issued a disturbing report about the sharp increase of anti-Israel activity on campus last year. Can you give us some of the, lowlights from that report?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for being here this morning, this afternoon, wherever you may be. But before I talk about the campus report, I want to tell you a story, firstly, about October 7th. So I was coming home from this really lovely Shabbat dinner with my friends and my husband, and it was one of the few times that my phone was not attached to my body. Anyone who knows me knows that it's an extension of me. It's much to the chagrin of everyone who knows me. So this is the one night I was very disconnected. As we were leaving Shabbat, I was scrolling through my WhatsApp messages with my friends who are in Israel, and at first it was, oh my goodness gracious, why is the red alert like popping off? Like, why are there so many? That's bad, rather unusual. And then it really turned to big concern because we started seeing videos circulating of Hamas joyriding and killing people. And that was, oh no, this is very different. Something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. Like, rockets are one thing, but this is different. And then as the realization of what was happening dawned on my husband and I, he very quickly, and bless his heart for this, understood what I was going to need to do for at least the next couple of hours into the next couple of days. I had texted two of my coworkers at like midnight my time, 3 a.m. their time, and they responded at 3 a.m. for reasons unknown. And I had texted them saying, today's going to be rough. I collected some really bad stuff, but I'm going to look tomorrow. I can't imagine this ending quickly, but hopefully it does. I think perhaps a core memory for me as a part of this text exchange was one of them asked how I defined a massacre. And that to me really speaks to the Center on Extremism. We will always strive to be precise and accurate, even in moments of acute horror. And then the next day, one of my dearest friends texted me to say that their fiance's cousin had gone missing. They were at Nova, and they weren't responding to their phone calls or text messages. And they knew I was going to be watching a lot of footage. And they asked if I saw something, potentially I just send it along to them. They found his body a few days later. He had been murdered. And between that time and when the attacks had happened and we finally had closure about what had happened, the celebrations had already happening. And if you're wondering, what does this have to do with Campus Report? Here's how this has to do with Campus Report. Campus was one of the prime locations for this kind of celebration and for this kind of incredibly disruptive behavior. By that point, this is around October 11th, October 12th, numerous student groups had put out statements supporting the attack or come as close as they could to endorsing the attacks without getting themselves banned on social media. They had held protests, they held vigils to honor our martyrs for what at that point was largely Hamas fighters. And this year's truly been one of the most disruptive years I have ever seen working in 8 years in the campus space, and especially in anti-Israel activism. And the numbers alone, the percent increases alone do not illustrate what students went through and what the community really went through this year. It doesn't illustrate the changes in the rhetoric, the explicit support for terrorism, and the very, very explicit change in the demands of Jewish and Zionist students. It can't touch that. We can say, oh, it was a 477% increase among certain categories, but what does that mean? So I hope that stories like this illustrate the personal impact that 10/7 had and the celebrations on campus that this attack had on so many people. With that said, the very, very large overview, we counted at least 2,087 incidents. And again, this is an undercount, but a lot of things that weren't reported. We use open source intelligence and we rely on partner data. And so this is an undercount. I'll just say an undercount. So at least, all of these are at least. Overall, 2,087 incidents. There were at least 1,418 protests, at least 80 boycott, divestment, sanction resolutions and referenda, at least 360 instances of harassment, and at least 200 instances of vandalism. So this is all to say, it was a very active year. Last year, we had, if we compare the categories, 665 overall incidents that included some different things. And so for over 2,000 incidents is an incredibly traumatic increase. And so with that, I know Shira has lots of really good questions, and so let's move to that.
Thanks, Lauren, and thank you for kind of telling that story. I think it puts kind of, it really gets some of the emotion behind some of the numbers. I know COE often is giving us the numbers and a lot of data, so thank you for sharing that. Can you just, for the folks listening who are used to seeing our annual audit of anti-Semitic incidents, can you just explain how these two reports are different?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for asking. The Campus Report tells a story of anti-Israel activism in the United States and anti-Israel extremism across the United States. And the audit tells specifically the story of anti-Semitism in the United States. And these are both snapshots of these things. We have a lot of different resources to help provide a much more detailed picture between the many of the reports that we put out. But these are just two of those resources. Obviously, the audit and Campus Report have a lot in common with each other. Israel is a common bond between these two things. And last year, what we saw specifically with the audit data last year, and specifically with Campus, we saw a total of 922 anti-Semitic incidents. That's roughly 10% of all of the incidents last year, which took place on college campuses and universities. And a lot of that came post 10/7. We recorded 732 campus-based anti-Semitic incidents between October 7th and the end of 2023. And overall, those anti-Semitic incidents included 695 incidents of harassment, 215 incidences of vandalism, and 12 assaults. So we were busy this year. So hopefully that helps paint a little bit of a picture of how those two reports are different, but they often work hand in hand to provide that bigger picture of Jewish life in the United States.
Great, thank you. Luda, there's a lot of parents and alumni listening who want to know what they can do, how they can best help their own students, how they can best help students who are at the colleges that they care about so much. What, as a recently graduated student, what do you need from these folks who want to help?
Thank you for the question. And thank you all for being here and wanting to support us, because students need all the support we can get right now. So for me, advocacy and leadership is my passion, and it's something I wanted to do. I'm the type of person that cannot sit on the sidelines. I have to be engaged and use my voice. But as Jonathan referenced, most Jewish students, they just want to be students. They want to go to class, they want to go to football games, they want to go to parties, they want to study, they want to get good grades. And it shouldn't be their burden to have to be combing through university policies, to have to be filing lawsuits, to have to be reporting these incidents to the ADL. And so whether or not they want to be involved, this is going to be their reality on campus this year. And so I think the first thing I would ask for parents and other supporters is to be engaged, to advocate for the students in your life, to be involved in the universities on your campuses, to read their policies, to hold them accountable, track their statements, because again, like we want to be students first and foremost. And just because students are Jewish or their relationship to Israel doesn't mean that they should have a completely different activist college experience than the other students are having. So that would be my first ask. But my second ask would be to support and wrap support around the students that do choose to step up. On all of these campuses that we've seen the worst cases, Columbia, Harvard, etc., we've seen students brave enough to put their names on lawsuits, to go in the news, to speak with their administrations. And because they've chosen to use their voices in this way, they are met with extreme backlash. And this is something I experienced personally. Many of us have experienced extreme hate on social media, social isolation, doxing, or addresses being leaked, personal threats. So we need students to step up, but also the students that do choose to step up, they're 18 to 22-year-olds, and it's scary. And so I hope that if any of you know a student or know students who find themselves in an advocacy position like I did, it's not always by choice, but right now we need to wrap them in love and support, because they're a voice for all of us and they should never have to feel alone, which I, from personal experience, know it can be a very lonely place to be.
Thank you. And I know people are asking what they can do right now. So one thing you can do is ADL has been activating folks to contact their governors to enact strategies to combat anti-Semitism, of like kind of full of government strategies, and to lean into especially protecting Jewish students by creating these strong strategies. So if you text the word governor to 26769, that's governor to 26769 right now, you'll be connected to that action, and you can take that action in most of the states. We have a few governors who've already done it. And we'll also put that link and that text code in the chat. I wanted to ask you both about one of the trends that Jonathan talked about, which was this embrace of terrorism. Lauren, can you talk about that a little bit, about what you're seeing? And then Luda, maybe you can react to like how it felt to see that on campus.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, I've been working in this space for many, many moons at this point, and I have not necessarily seen anything quite like what I have seen this year. Last year, we had seen some support for terror groups. For a long time, it had been wink, wink, nudge, nudge, know what I mean, know what I mean. Say no more, towards PFLP fighters and Hamas fighters, and we're going to honor our martyrs, and we're supporting the resistance. There was a channel called Resist. It's a Telegram channel. It started off on Instagram and Twitter, though. It's now been banned on those social media channels due to explicit support for terrorism. But it's a Telegram channel that translates various communiques from terrorist organizations into English. That has really taken off. It took off last year. It exploded this year. And so we had been expecting it, but this year, what was really truly unexpected to at least me was the explicit support for the attack, for the moving beyond not necessarily moving beyond, but calling Israelis legitimate targets, even if they were civilians. That was new to me as well. And also the explicit support for things like PFLP, and moving beyond just like implicit, yeah, this is interesting, and going, yes, we'll definitely put their flags on our campuses, we'll show their flags, we'll wear their headbands, we'll disseminate their materials on our social media and say that, yes, this is a part of the political education that we want to be giving to our peers and to our leaders. So that was new and interesting, and something that we haven't necessarily seen in years past, and I don't expect that to stop. And I know that's kind of that's distressing to see. It was distressing to see as someone who's a little bit older, and I can't imagine what that felt like as someone who's has to talk to these people every day.
Well, tell us, Luda, what did that feel like?
You know, it's hard to describe. For me, I always found myself, when I saw these things on campus, taking out my phone and taking a picture, because I didn't know how to react in the moment, but I thought I should post this, I should send this to my group chats and show everyone how abhorrent this is. But the only people I really had to send these photos to were my Jewish friends, my Jewish group chats, because I knew that the other communities that I was part of would probably not care or understand why this rhetoric was so hurtful, so scary, to see right in the immediate aftermath of October 7th. So that's kind of the first thing. But what really makes me feel kind of hopeless sometimes is to think about what these symbols being so normalized on our campuses reflect about our greater higher education system. Makes me think about the trend that Jonathan talked about of the entrenchment of and normalization of extreme anti-Israel advocacy in academic settings, because I've seen in every other activist movement, which I've protested for things myself and been an activist for other issues, there's a strong culture of accountability. There are things that a movement stands for and doesn't stand for. And what I haven't seen on my campuses is any accountability for the blatantly hateful, horrible symbols that celebrated October 7th. For there to be a sign up that says glory to the Al-Aqsa flood, or from the river to the sea, or F the Zionists, and then to see a poli-sci professor I had last semester teaching his class in the middle of the encampment a few feet away from the sign. It makes me question, where's the accountability? If no one is speaking out against this language, does it mean that everyone's in favor of it? So I think the last thing I'll say is a question that I get asked a lot is, do you think that these students even know what this means? Do they know what from the river to the sea means? Do they even know what intifada means? And frankly, the more and more I get asked this question, I have a hard time with it, because we don't give any other hateful group the benefit of the doubt of them not knowing, of ignorance, because however ignorant they are to this language, they are smart enough to know that the Jewish people are a minority group, a marginalized group with a unique history, and that the burden is on them to do this research and to understand why this language is harmful. And so I don't think we should give them the benefit of the doubt that they don't know. That's on them to do better and have more accountability amongst themselves. But I'll go further to say that our Jewish student leaders from the Jewish Student Union, from Chabad, from Hillel, have sat down with students from the Palestine Coalition, and I've heard similar stories across the country, and explained, when you used this chant last week, from the river to the sea, when you used this chant, globalize the Intifada, this is how it made us feel. This is why it's problematic. And they proceeded to use those chants and to put those slogans on posters and on graffiti over and over. And that's what's so disappointing.
Thank you. I want to share a couple resources, and then we're going to continue on with the Q&A. But if you or a student has experienced or witnessed an incident of anti-Semitism, extremism, bias, bigotry, or hate, you can report it at adl.org/report-incident, and we'll put that in the chat. And also, I just want to highlight our call website. This is something that any student, family, faculty, or staff member can go to the website or text call help to 51555 to report incidents of anti-Semitic discrimination, intimidation, harassment. that may necessitate legal action. This is a program ADL instituted with Hillel International, the Brandeis Center, and law firms, and lawyers will assess these reports and let you know resources that are available. So we'll put both the regular incident reporting and the call website in the chat. And now I'd like to invite Jonathan Greenblatt back to join Luda and Lauren to continue our discussion and take some of the audience questions. Thanks, Jonathan, for joining us again. I thought you might want to respond.
Can I just say as we get started? Yeah, sure. I just think the thing that I need to do as we take in all, I'm seeing the chat sort of blow up, is really extend my appreciation to Lauren, who does such amazing work every single day. She is one of the best people we have in our entire Center of Extremism. And I also cannot extend enough my appreciation, my gratitude for Luda. Like, what an extraordinary young woman you are, Luda, with amazing things ahead of you. How blessed is our community? How fortunate are we to have you on the front line? When I was a student, an undergrad, when I was in graduate school, I didn't want to be, in these fights. I was worried about getting good grades, paying my loans, and maybe going to a fraternity party. What you have done and what so many of you and your peers have done, really, like, kol hakavod, all of us, the old people, owe you an extraordinary debt of gratitude. So thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. I was just going to ask you to respond, but you have. The trends that Jonathan talked about, we're going to put a new document that kind of outlines in a little more detail in the chat. But Lauren, as we're going towards October 7th, the things that Jonathan talked about, those trends, what are you anticipating?
Yes, so we're anticipating it to be a busy time, both from the Jewish community side and from the detractor side. We are tracking we're tracking a October 5th International Day of Action that is being put together by the usual cast and crew, the National Students for Justice in Palestine, and a bunch of their local chapters, Palestinian Youth Movement, Al-Auda, Answer, the usual folks. There's going to be quite a bit of protests, we think, but because it's a day of action, I am anticipating seeing other kinds of things happening as well. So far, we haven't seen necessarily any explicit threats towards Jewish institutions or Jewish communities. Although, who knows, it's the year where we're doing Looney Tunes warfare, so anything could happen, but we're not seeing it so far. Additionally, we are tracking this Week of Rage, which is from October 7th to October 11th. October 11th is also Erev Yom Kippur, or the day right before Yom Kippur starts. So that's going to be, I think, an interesting, intense time, especially for the Jewish students, and definitely something for law enforcement to keep in mind as they're tracking incidents on campus, and especially as they get towards the end of the week. I think for that, we're anticipating more kinds of protests, that kind of thing. And with all of that said, given that some of these groups have engaged in more direct or escalatory actions, we can anticipate seeing some of that, but that is rarely ever announced ahead of time. But it would not be beyond the norm to see something like that.
Jonathan, I know during this year we've leaned into both advocacy, calling out what we need to see, and also kind of counseling universities. Do you have some advice going forward based on what you're already seeing, parents if you're already talking to, what you would tell administrators who call you?
I think there are a few things. So number one, again, Luda and her classmates are literally on the front line, and we need to support them. Part of supporting them is showing up when they need us to. And I think what Lauren just laid out is right. We are seeing these activities come together, and we can't afford to be silent. Everyone has a voice. So you can find actions to do through ADL. You could find actions to do through your own local federation. And all of us at ADL are big fans of and supporters of the federation system. Locally on the ground in communities, it is really important. And all of you are alumni of institutions, or all of you have kids or grandkids or nieces or nephews or godchildren or co-workers' kids who are at institutions. So use your power. That can mean writing a letter. That can mean making a phone call. That can mean making another call and 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 another call. That can mean, instead of sending the donation you normally would, send a donation of $1. If you send your alma mater a $1 donation, I promise you, as the day is long, they will pick, someone from development will pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, instead of giving us your typical donation this year of $5,000, you sent us $1. Why is that? And let them know why you did that. So I guess my real counsel here is don't be silent. Luda isn't being silent, despite, again, the power dynamics in her classrooms and on her campus. We owe it to Luda, we owe it to all these students that we can't be silent. So I guess the last thing I'll say is we often talk about the power of speaking out, but you've got to share facts. Stick to the facts. Please, dear God in heaven above, don't write to the university professor and say that you hear that cats and dogs are being eaten, because they're not. Don't write to the professor and say that you hear that, Sinwar is going to be the commencement speaker at such and such, because he's not. So Lauren was just like laying out the facts. Like, you got to stick to the facts. You got to be measured. You got to be sober in order to be taken seriously. Doesn't mean you be quiet, but you can still be, again, measured and thoughtful rather than just being like emotional and loud. In this case, in our experience, measured and thoughtful, a bit like the tortoise and the hare, measured and thoughtful always wins the race.
Luda, you've testified before Congress. You've talked to your university president. What would you tell an incoming, what are you telling your brother? What would you tell an incoming student to be prepared for, to be ready for, to be able to have the resources they need to have a good year?
Well, yes, I did have the incredible opportunity to testify this summer in front of the Senate Bipartisan Task Force Combating Anti-Semitism, and so many other students have testified since October 7th and bravely shared their stories. I think that the Jewish student community really has it figured out, and although we've had such a challenging year, there was so much hope, because I've never seen a more unified Jewish campus community than we had post October 7th, and the way it really held out even a whole year later. Our Shabbat dinners at both Chabad and Hillel and across the country were the most packed they ever were. High holidays, Jewish events, everything, registration is so high. And I think that Jewish students have realized that we have to be in community if we're going to be able to have the resilience to go through something like this again. I think that I heard as a leader, many younger Jewish students came to me and said, I'm going to miss class today. I'm going to hide my Star of David. I was late to class because I took the long way. And the first thing I always say is, we can't let them win. We have to keep going to class. We have to keep getting good grades. We have to keep showing up to Shabbat dinners, even after Chabad Center was vandalized. We have to stay in community, because that is our story, and that's how we stay so resilient. And I think my brothers figured that out. And I think Jewish students across the country, even who've never stepped foot in a synagogue only a few times in their life, are now starting to find their communities on campuses, which is amazing. But the second thing I would say is that even though we are such a minority in our campuses, we have to use our voices and we have to stay involved. I heard from so many people, like, what are we going to do after you leave and after you graduate? And we have to have Jewish students in student government, even though those places aren't the most welcoming to us always. We have to have our administrators see our faces and hear our stories. We have to have connections with our professors, our tenured faculty. You do not have to be a student body president to be a leader. You can be a leader in your study group. You can be a leader in your sorority. But just because it's a hard time, we cannot have Jewish students hide away. So now is the time to use our voices. Now is the time to be a leader. And as I said, you do not have to have a title or a high position to be a leader. walking another student to class, sharing support with someone, teaching another peer who's not Jewish about our experience. That's leadership, and we need everyone to be leaders right now.
Well put. So Jonathan, there's a couple questions that I'll toss your way, but I'm also happy to kind of answer with some of the resources from our campus hub and some of the things our team is working on. The first is from a professor, and we have a few professors at least on the line. And this person is saying that even raising some of these questions about some of these issues that you flagged is met with hostility. And what can faculty and staff do who are often made to feel alone as they're trying to raise these issues, stand up for their students, stand up for their community?
Well, a few things. So number one, Luda said at the top how you need to like wrap the students in love. I think the faculty can wrap the students in safety. Whether or not, I just heard about this from an art history professor at Columbia. I was just told yesterday about at Columbia, a Jewish woman who like has made her office an open place for students to come who need consultation or consolation and help. So I think it doesn't matter what your field of research, doesn't matter about the specifics of your scholarship. Any faculty, Jewish or non-Jewish, can be there for other students who need support and are looking for advice or guidance, number one. I think number two, I mean, you wouldn't think you'd have to say this in an academic institution, but if you're a faculty member, keep in mind there are whistleblower laws that give you the power to call out when you see stuff that's happening that's wrong. And you should take advantage of that. I mean, Luda is in a way a kind of whistleblower. She's not, she's a student. But if you are, you know, again, in the faculty lounge, so to speak, and you hear about stuff that's happening, your students tell you, you should blow the whistle. It is not acceptable that in classes that are completely orthogonal to the Middle East conflict, that professors are inserting lessons or using language which alienates or marginalizes the students who identify as Jewish or Israeli or as allies. You can't do that. And that I even have to say this out loud is a bit bewildering, but you can't discriminate against people based on their national origin or their ethnicity or their faith. It's a violation of Title VI, but who cares about the law? It's just wrong. Stuff you learn like in elementary school, it is wrong. So I don't care how many PhDs you have. If you think the idea of if you think you make a point by using the Jewish students as an example, you fail. You get an F. So I think professors who know that there are colleagues doing that should blow the whistle. You should raise the concern. You should go to the administration. You should go to the board. You should go to the public and let people know. Again, there are whistleblower laws to protect you. So what should faculty do? Obviously, you should be there for the students. I shouldn't say obviously, but number one, be there for your students, Jewish or non-Jewish. Whether you are Jewish or not, just a faculty member, doesn't matter. Number two, be a whistleblower if you have reason to believe that your colleagues are putting Jewish students at risk. And keep in mind, when you do that, you have an ethical responsibility, and the school could be subject to Title VI violations, which can be profoundly damaging and paralyzing to the learning experience. So I think when you are a whistleblower, you not only protect the kids, you protect your own integrity and the institution itself. And then number three, call ADL. If you hear about something and you don't know what to do, call us. Let us help you. And so this will be the last thing I say, Shira. ADL is here as a resource. We work for you. ADL, we don't work for our donors. We don't work for a political party. We don't work for, I don't know, a foreign power. Tell that to like, you know, a certain presidential candidate. We work for the Jewish community. We work for all marginalized groups. Like we work for you. You know, Lauren is an analyst, as was noted, in the Center on Extremism. Shira is the vice president of all of our campus activities. Leah, who set this up, is in our marketing department. And you know what? The three of them and me, we all have the same job description: protect the Jewish people. That's it. And so to that end, we work for you. And we work for other marginalized groups, whether they're Haitian immigrants, or Asian American people or Latinos or whatever. So if you're a member of the faculty or you're on staff at an institution, once again, number one, be there for your Jewish students. Number two, don't be afraid to be a whistleblower. And number three, call the ADL.
Thanks, Jonathan. I'm just going to add two other things. Faculty, and for parents and alumni and students, we have a website, a campus hub called No Tolerance for Antisemitism.adl.org. We'll put that at adl.org. We'll put that in the chat. There are resources there for faculty. And if you want to contact us, we are connecting faculty members across the country who are concerned, who want resources, who want to have that network. And you can write to us at campus@adl.org. Also, if you are a member of a Jewish alumni group, you can contact us. We are working to connect and to support Jewish alumni groups across the country who want to do this work together, who want to share resources and advocate together. So if we could put, you can contact us again at campus@adl.org. So we're coming to the top of the hour. So I'll ask a question that we do like to end most of our programs with here, because as Jonathan says, we move from hate to hope. So I'll start with Lauren and then Luda and finish with Jonathan. What gives you hope in this really difficult, concerning moment? Lauren?
Yes, and I love this so much. So firstly, and this is going to sound kind of strange, but I don't think that you can do the work of the Center on Extremism if you're not baseline a pretty hopeful person. It can be so demoralizing sometimes, and when we look at some of the worst, it can often feel like, what is the point of that? And at the heart of the Center on Extremism, and I really think at the heart of this agency, and obviously everyone here, is that you can make a difference. You can do something, even if it's small, and that matters, and that makes a difference. And I feel like that, to me, gives me a lot of hope, just to think that there's so many people who really strongly believe that even the littlest thing can do something. And I also, okay, so I was an English major. And English majors, as some of you may know or not, we collect quotes. Crows collect shiny things. Like English majors collect like little quotes and we put them up around. But Thomas Smith, a colleague and a friend of mine, shared this. I shared this really beautiful passage in the aftermath of Hirsch Goldberg Pollen's murder. And it really struck a chord with me about the difference between hope and cynicism, and I'm hoping that perhaps it can strike a similar chord with you. It's from Nick Cave, and he writes, unlike cynicism, hopefulness is hard-earned. It makes demands upon us and can often feel like the most indefensible and lonely place on earth. Hopefulness is not a neutral position either. It's adversarial. It is the warrior emotion that can lay waste to cynicism. Each redemptive or loving act, as small as you like, keeps the devil down in the hole. It says the world and its inhabitants have value and are worth defending. It says the world is worth believing in. And in time, we come to find that it is so. So this year has been really hard. It's been devastating, but Jewish students are worth defending. The Jewish community is worth defending. Our allies are worth defending. And hopefully in time, we all come to believe that this is true. And we come together and do more to make that a reality. So with that, Shira, that's how
Thanks,
I'm
Lauren.
going.
Luda, what gives you hope?
That was so beautifully said, Lauren. So after I graduated, I spoke at my graduation, and I went from a very kind of lonely and isolated place. I flew to Washington, D.C., and I immediately started my summer internship with the ADL's National Affairs team. And working on this team truly is what has given me hope this summer. And I've had a different, more positive message to send my peers. And that is that we, as much as we might feel alone on campus sometimes, we really are not alone. The fact that I was invited to a discussion to speak to a Republican and a Democratic senator who were both on the same page that what I and my peers experienced was completely wrong, and they both were equally committed to addressing this issue, that gave me hope, knowing that this issue is bipartisan and there is bipartisan support for helping Jewish students. The fact that all these Jewish organizations were able to sign onto letters in our support, the fact that there are lobbyists here in DC who are around the clock working to get legislation passed in support of Jewish students. That gave me hope. I didn't think anti-Semitism is what I would go to in my life. I studied many political issues and I studied political science. And in everything I've studied, I've never seen such across the spectrum bipartisan support for an issue and understanding as I've seen for Jewish students. And so I really strongly agree with what Jonathan said about measured and thoughtful always wins the race. I love that Jewish students on campuses are following the rules, dotting their I's, crossing their T's, not being adversarial with their administrations, and trying to have dialogue even when it's so hard. And I think because we are this way, we will get through this and things will get better for us eventually. So despite everything, I'm filled with hope.
Thank you, Luda. We're so lucky to have you, as are your colleagues. Jonathan, we're at the hour, so quickly, tell us what you're hopeful for so I can give the closing words that I'm required to do.
I'll tell you what give me hope. Number one, Luda and Lauren give me hope. We are so blessed at ADL to have incredibly talented professionals like Lauren, like you, Shira, who do this work every day, who could be doing lots of other things, but this is what you do. So Shira and Lauren, you guys give me hope. Luda, you give me immeasurable optimism. Like, again, your bravery and your courage, stepping up when you weren't asked to do so. Amazing. Look, all of the folks on the Zoom give me hope, who are choosing to spend their time with us and want to do something different. Parents, professors, folks just who care. I want to say one other thing. I saw someone say that I injected politics into this conversation. I'm not sure how you got that, but let me be crystal clear. I don't really care how you vote. I don't really care what lever you pull in November, but I do care about what you value. Tropes like dual loyalty have no place. Tropes like accusing the Jews of being responsible for this and that, they have no place. And there's nothing political about calling out prejudice. Period. End of story. Full stop. And so what gives me hope is I think on both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, people who play for the blue team and the red team, deeply understand the need to lock arms, to join hands, and to fight back against hate. That gives me hope as well.
Well, I want to thank all three of you for joining us. Thank you for staying on. For all the folks who are listening, please watch your inbox for the daily campus crisis alert. And we have actions in there many days where you can write directly to campus leadership. And right now, if you text governor to 26769, that'll give you the link to write to your governors about protecting Jewish students on campus. Again, we also shared our links for reporting an incident and for the call line if you need legal help about something that you've seen on campus. We hope you'll stay safe and stay well. And we thank you all for being part of this fight against hate. Have a good rest of your day.